Welcome to the Polinode tutorial on creating a survey. In this tutorial, we're going to walk through how to create a relationship-based survey from scratch. You'll see that we're in a demo account here and we have navigated to the surveys view. And in this account, we've got a template survey. So every Polinode account starts off with a template survey. And if you want to have a look at these questions, you can just click on Edit and you can have a look at some template questions. One way to get started quickly is to just clone the template survey like so. So we could call this template survey cloned and hit OK. And now we have a cloned version of the template survey, which we could go and edit and customize as we see fit. But in this tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to start from scratch with a new survey. So I'm going to hit this new survey button. And I'm going to call this example survey, and I'll hit create. So there are 3 steps when you first create a survey. So the first of those steps is you need to create your questions, and we'll do that in a second. And then the second step is you need to upload your respondents. So you do that under lists. And the third step is that you need to send that survey out to the respondents. So you do that under collect responses. So let's hit this question button, and you'll see that, that we're presented with a number of different question types to choose from. So let's just go through each of these question types and have a look at each one. So the first is the text box question type, and I'm just going to add some dummy text in here. And we can have a look at what this question type looks like just by hitting the preview question button. So as you would expect, this is just an open text type question, so the respondent will enter an answer in here, and that can be any text that they like. So this is the type of question where you could ask, for example, what city are you based in, or something that doesn't have necessarily a defined number of answers. And the next field we see here is relationship question. So this is a really important point in Polinode in that every single question type can either be a relationship question or a regular question, a non-relationship question. And relationship questions will typically, relationship questions you ask about often respondents, right? And those relationship questions, for each relationship question that you ask, you'll be able to generate a network. And non-relationship questions are just like regular questions for a regular survey. So, what is your age? What is your gender? Any type of question like that. And non-relationship questions, rather than generating separate networks, the answers to non-relationship questions become attributes on the nodes. So they are data that get added to the nodes in your network, those items that are connected in the network. So most often that's data on respondents. So if we ask respondents, what is your age? We will then have access to an attribute on those respondents when we're exploring our network data, where that attribute is the age of the respondent. So we're going to leave this on regular questions for a moment. But yeah, really important point is that each one of these question types can either be a relationship question or a non-relationship question. And you can also make a question either required, in which case the respondent must enter an answer to it, or optional. So if we have required as no, the question is optional. Let's also have a look at some of the advanced options. So the text box question type doesn't have that many advanced options. The first is to enter a question abbreviation. So if we were asking the respondent, what is your age? We could enter age as the abbreviation here. And the question abbreviation for a non-relationship question will be the name of that attribute on the node. So if we entered age as our question abbreviation, once we generate the data and have access to it when we're exploring the networks, the attribute that holds the answer for this question will be called age. Now, if we don't have any question abbreviation, then the attribute will just be the number of the question. So this is question 1, so that attribute will be Q1 in that example. And we also have this option here, attribute. So by default, if we're asking open text questions, like using this text box type, no will be selected for attribute. And in that example, you won't actually have the non-relationship question answers generated as attributes on the nodes. You'll have access to that data when you export it or when you view the response, but it won't actually be an attribute on the node which you can size by, color by, etc. And the reason why that defaults to no is that typically for an open text question, all the respondents will have different answers. So it doesn't really make sense to have that as an attribute that you can size by, color by, etc., because they'll all be different. But for other question types like multiple choice, so if you're asking, what is your gender, for example, and just giving male and female as options, then you will most likely want that to be an attribute. And by default, it will be an attribute for that question type. And that means that you can size by, color by, filter by, etc. So that's an advanced option. Generally, the defaults are fine for that. And you'll most often want to enter a question abbreviation, but you don't necessarily have to. And this question abbreviation is also relevant for relationship questions. So if we had made this yes as the relationship question, the question abbreviation that we enter here will be the name of the network. So when we generate a network, when we generate networks for this survey, each question, each relationship question in the survey will be generated as a separate network. And the names of those networks will come from the question abbreviations if we enter those question abbreviations. And if we leave this blank, the name of the network will just be the question number, like Q1, and then the question text. So here would just be this AAA, but whatever we enter as the question text. So those advanced options aren't compulsory, but they're there if you need them or if you want to make use of them. So let's have a look at the next question type. So numerical. And again, we're just going to leave this as a non-relationship question just to have a look at it. And so if we preview this, we can see that we can enter a number in here. So this is designed for numerical input. And we also have a numerical slider question. So let's have a look at this. And so we can ask some question that, again, requires a numerical input, but where we can bound that input and where the respondent can slide the slider up and down. And everything that you see here can be edited. So we can change the minimum value of that slider, also the text that appears next to the minimum on that slider, the maximum value of that slider, the text that appears next to that maximum value on the slider, the default value, so that's the point at which the slider will start off, so where it'll default to, and also the increment. So if we change this to 5, for example, and then go back to preview, we can see that that slider increments by 5 rather than 1. And there are advanced options for that slider as well. It has the same advanced options as the text box question, except that we have this additional show value. So if we have this as no and we preview, now we have a slider, but there's no actual value above that. So sometimes you won't want to show an actual value, but rather just the slider. So that's numerical slider. And then multiple choice is as you would expect. You just have a number of text answer options that you can enter in here. And so let's preview this. And we can select one or more of these answer options. And we can edit these options. So if we change this to option A, we'll see that this becomes option A. And we can add an option. So here we've added option 4. And we can delete an option. So here we've deleted option 2. And we can also determine whether these multiple choice questions should be multiple choice, which is the default here, or just a single choice. So if we change multiple selections to no, then we are faced with a single choice here. So by default, multiple selections will be on yes, but if we have multiple selections on no, we get the radio button option instead of the checkbox option. And similarly, we have some advanced options. So we've already seen question abbreviation. We can select whether the display type is buttons or selecting from a drop-down. So if we change to select from drop-down, we see this. Or select from drop-down with a single choice, like so. Let's leave this as buttons with multiple selections. And we can, as an advanced option, enter the minimum number of selections that a respondent must choose and the maximum number of selections they must choose. So those are optional constraints that you can enforce on the respondent. And we've already seen attribute. So by default, this is yes for multiple choice. And we also have a matrix question type. So here you'll see we have row headings as well as column headings. So let's preview this. And so we have that option A, option 3, option 4, which we saw previously. But now we also have column headings, option 1, option 2, option 3. And so the respondent then can select like so. And so you can edit these column headings and edit these row headings just as we saw previously. You can also choose whether we allow multiple selections or not. So here we just have single selections. And there are advanced options. So there's no new advanced options here, just question abbreviation and attribute. The search and select question type is really helpful, particularly for relationship questions when you're generating names. So when you're asking a respondent about relationships like who do you go to for advice, or who do you work with often, or who do you view as a mentor, anything like that, and you have a large number of items for them to choose from. It can be thousands or tens of thousands of different items in a list that you upload. The search and select question type is really helpful for that. So again, we're not going to make this a relationship question yet, but just to preview it, we can now start typing and we'll see that we can select these different options. Not in the preview, but once this question is created, you'll be able to select from these different options. And we can add options here and so on. There's also some advanced options. We have the same advanced options that we've seen previously. So question abbreviation, minimum number of selections, maximum number of selections, and whether this should be an attribute or not. Descriptive text. So descriptive text is what we would use to add some instructions to respondents or to add a heading in the survey, anything like that. So if we preview it, as you would expect, it just appears as text. And we can also make a heading quickly by just changing this to heading. We preview, we have a heading like so. And I should add here that all of the text for these questions can be, you can use Markdown. So Markdown, in case you haven't come across it, is a way of marking up different formatting options or inserting URLs or images just using the text on your keyboard. As an example, if we put these stars around the text that we have here, you can see that we have italics, or double stars. You can see that we have bold text. So Polinode supports Markdown. If you want to learn more about Markdown, I would just Google Markdown and feel free to experiment with using that. And then we also have the page break option. So this is where you will want to insert a page break in your survey. And this is particularly relevant for when you use question piping, which we'll have a look at in a second. So when you pipe the answers from one question to another question, you will always want to have a page break in between that source question and the question that you're piping to, so that the answers get populated as the respondent moves from one page to another page. So we'll go back to text box, and like I said, every single question type can be a relationship question or a non-relationship question. So if we make this text box question a relationship question, you'll see that we get to choose from 3 different sources of relationships. So these sources of relationships can either come from the respondent list, the supplementary list, or answer to earlier relationship question. So if our source of relationships for a relationship question is a respondent list, that just means that we're asking respondents about other respondents. If it's a supplementary list, then what we're doing is we're asking respondents about either a superset or subset of respondents or something else altogether. So it doesn't have to be people or respondents at all. We could be asking them about their favorite holiday destination or values that they hold particularly dear or organizations that they've collaborated with, literally anything at all. So a supplementary list allows you to extend this relationship-based survey functionality very generally to other items or other things or other people other than just respondents. An answer to earlier relationship question, this is what we use for question piping. So we can link the responses from a previous question into a subsequent question. So let's just have a preview of what a text box question looks like with the source of relationships being the respondent list. So here we have 5 example respondents in this survey. So when you create a new survey, your respondent list is pre-populated with example respondent 1, example respondent 2 through to 5. And because this is a text question, it just repeats this open text input for each one of these 5 different respondents here. So obviously if you had thousands of respondents, you wouldn't want to inflict that upon your respondents. But in some cases, or if you're piping to a text box question, that could be relevant. Same thing for numerical. If we preview that, you can see we have a numerical input for each of those 5 example respondents. Numerical slider, same thing. We can slide now for each of those 5 respondents. Multiple choice. Here we just have one selection, and we can select from each of those 5. And if we made this multiple selections, we can select multiple of these respondents. So this is what you would use for a name generator question, where you have a reasonable number of items for the respondent to choose from. I tend to recommend around 100 items. Any more than around 100, it starts to get a little bit laborious for the respondent to go through and select from that list of more than 100 items. If you have longer lists, so if you're running a survey with more than say 100 people, you might want to use the search and select question type. So we'll have a look at that in a second. But the next one here is the matrix of choices. So let's just preview that. And as you would expect, we have these 3 options up the top, and we have the ability for each of our 5 respondents to select which of those options apply. So here we have multiple choice, but we could make that single choice if we wanted. And search and select, I promised you that we'd have a look at this. And so here we can start typing the name of a respondent, and we'd be able to select that respondent. So this is if you have a large number of respondents to select from. This is great as a name generator question. And descriptive text, it doesn't really make sense to have a descriptive text relationship question, so they will always be just regular questions, and same with page break. So every one of these question types, so text box, numerical slider, multiple choice, matrix of choices, search and select, can be either regular questions, in which case the answers become attributes on the nodes, or relationship questions, in which case those answers generate interactive networks. So let's have a look at an example here. So first up, I'm going to make this a text box question. I'm going to leave it as no, we don't want a relationship question. And I'm just going to ask people, for example, what city do you live in? Now, you'll never really want to ask people what their name is, because the nature of relationship-based surveys is such that every respondent will have a unique URL, so based on the respondent list that you upload. So you'll always know the name of the respondents associated with that. You'll know the name of the respondents because they all have their own unique URL. So there's no need to ask for information that you already have. So let's make this just a standard text box question like so, and we'll add that. And then I'm going to put in here, now I know in the Quick Start Guide, we already demonstrated using the search and select question type as a name generator. So here I'm going to demonstrate using the multiple choice question type as a name generator type question. So here, and I'll ask the question, say, just to keep it very simple, who do you work with often? And we'll make this a relationship question, and we'll leave it as the respondent list, and we'll hit add. And then I'm also going to add, now in the Quick Start Guide, I piped answers from that search and select question to a numerical slider question, but here I'm going to pipe the answers from that multiple choice question into a matrix of choices question. But before I do that, I'm just going to insert a page break, because I know that I always need a page break before I do some question piping. And here I am going to now create my matrix of choices question, and I am going to, for this question text, I'm going to categorize this relationship. So I will ask something like, let's say, how important is it for you to have more access to the people you nominated? We'll make this a relationship question, and for question piping, I'm going to do answer to earlier relationship question, and I'm going to hook this up to question 2. And for my column headings, I will say for option 1, not important, or let's say not at all, somewhat important, very, and lastly critical. And we will insist that people can only choose one of those options, so we'll change multiple selections to no. And now if we preview this, we'll see the source of relationships for this question is currently empty because this is a piped question. So that makes sense, and we'll add that in. And now we can check this survey. So let's check this. And it tells us that this survey looks good. Now, if we hadn't put a page break in here, it would have told us that we need a page break. So that's always just a nice check, just to make sure that, that there's nothing that you've forgotten in terms of creating your survey. We can also hit preview. And so what city do you live in? Well, we can type Sydney here. And who do you work with often? We can select example 2 and example 3. And here, how important is it for you to have more access to the people you nominated? Not at all, and somewhat. And then we could hit submit, but this is just a survey preview to give you an idea of the survey that we've created. So that's a very simple survey. One thing that we haven't demonstrated yet is, if we go to relationship question, we haven't demonstrated supplementary lists yet. So like I said, a supplementary list allows you to ask questions about items that are a lot more general than respondent lists. So here it tells us this survey currently has no supplementary lists. You can upload supplementary lists under lists. So what I'll do is I'm going to upload a respondent list and a supplementary list, and then I'll come back and just demonstrate creating a question involving a supplementary list as well. So let's go to lists here. So you can either click on the top here, lists, or you could hit continue to move to the right. And you'll see we have respondent list here. And a respondent list is really your lists of, at a minimum, names and emails of all the respondents to your survey. So how do we get our respondent list uploaded? Well, we'll hit upload respondent list. And here we can download a template. So if we hit download template, We can then open this template up. And this list has a minimum of name and email. So we need the name and email for each respondent that we're going to upload. And then it has these optional additional attributes. So here we have example categorical attribute and example numerical attribute. Now we can change this to something like gender or anything that you like, and we can say this is a male and this is a female, male, female, male, just for example. And we could change this to tenure, and then these could represent years that this person has been with the company. And in this list, you'll want to have names, so we could change this to John Smith, and then you'll want to edit emails. So just for this demonstration, I'm going to leave this, this respondent list as is. I'm just going to hit save, and then I'm going to go back to my survey. And here I'm going to hit choose file and upload this respondent list. And you'll see we get a message here to upload more respondents than are included in a free survey. Please purchase credits by clicking here. So you can upload a respondent list with up to 10 respondents without having to purchase any respondent credits. So that allows you to use all the functionality that Polinode's relationship-based surveys tool provides. So you can draft your survey and run it and experiment and basically do a dry run with a limited number of respondents without needing to purchase any respondent credits. So because this list that we had just had 5 respondents, we can, we don't have to worry about purchasing respondent credits at this point. But for a more realistic survey, you'll want to go to billing and purchase some respondent credits. So I'm just going to hit upload. And you'll see John Smith appears. This list is in alphabetical order. We have the emails. We also have status that tells us that we haven't sent the initial email to any of these respondents yet. And if we want to edit the name or email of any of our respondents, we can do so just by clicking that edit button. We can also sort by name or by email just by clicking up here. And if we have a very large list, we could search. So if we start typing John, we'll see that John Smith appears. If you need to edit your respondent list in bulk, you'll want to download your respondent list with this button, and then you can make edits to that list and then re-upload that list. And it's important to understand that that list, when you re-upload it, what Polinode does is it matches either the name or email in that list. And if that row in that list matches either an existing name or email in your current respondent list, then that row will be updated. So your respondent will be updated with the information on that row. But if that row doesn't match either the name or email, then that respondent then a new respondent will be created with the information in that row. And if in your uploaded list, so once you've made any edits, you re-upload a list, if an existing respondent doesn't match either the name or email of any of the rows in that list, then that respondent will be deleted, and its response will be deleted as well. And you'll get a warning before respondents are deleted, just in case you accidentally delete them. But that's how editing your respondent list works. Now, I'm going to have a look at supplementary lists here, and we're told there are currently no supplementary lists for this survey. So how do we create a new supplementary list? We just hit new supplementary list. And then it's the same story, right? So we can download a template for our supplementary list. And if we open that up, we'll see it's very similar to the respondent list that we saw previously, but there's no email column. So the only compulsory column is name. And then we have these optional additional attributes, right? So with both of the respondent lists and supplementary lists, if you include these optional additional attributes, these extra columns here, the data that you include in these columns will be available as attributes in your networks. So when you're exploring that data. So that helps if you already have, for example, demographic data. You can include it in the respondent list or supplementary list that you're uploading, and then you don't have to ask respondents for that information when you're running the survey. So, like I said, these supplementary lists, these could be organizations or holiday destinations or anything at all. So let's make this. We'll make this a list of holiday destinations just as an example. So we'll make it Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Canada, and the United States. And I'm just going to delete these optional columns here. And I will hit save on that supplementary list. And now if I return back here, I will call this holiday destinations. And I can upload that supplementary list and hit upload list. And now we have that, that supplementary list, and we could download that list again, or we can update that list. So if we download it and then edit it, say we want to add a new holiday destination, we can do so. And then if we hit update, we'll be able to update that list with the edited list. We can also delete that list here. And if we return back to questions, we'll add a question at the end here. So we'll make it on a new page. And we'll ask people, we'll use a multiple choice question. And we'll say, what is your favorite holiday destination? And we'll make this a relationship question, and we'll choose a supplementary list, and we'll choose that holiday destinations list. And because we're asking favorite, we'll insist on just one selection, and we'll hit add. And there we go. So this is now linked to our supplementary list. So back to lists, and then collect responses. So this is the third and final kind of step in creating a new survey. And the easiest way of getting surveys out to people is just to email them out. So here we've got built-in mail merge functionality, and we can edit the email subject that respondents will see. And we can also edit the body of the email that respondents will see. So there are three different fields that get used in the mail merge functionality: first name, full name, or URL. So here you see we've got first name and we've got URL. And the text in these curly brackets will be replaced with the first name of the respondent. So it's that name before the space in the respondent list that you upload. And this URL will be replaced with the unique URL that when clicked will take the respondent to their response. So you should always leave this URL in here if you're going to send out surveys using this initial email functionality. And you probably will want to include the name of the respondent to address it. But otherwise, you can fully customize the text of the email that they will see. And then you'll want to sign this with your name. So you can say, kind regards, John Smith. And then hit save. And then you can send a test email. So send a test email to yourself or to someone else. And they will get a link to a test version of this response. So they won't be able to actually save a response, but they will be able to see what the respondents will see. And when you're ready, you just hit email survey and then click email all, and this survey will be emailed out to all the respondents. But I want to show you one more thing in here, and that's under advanced options. So if you don't want to send emails out to everyone, and generally the way to do it is to send emails out to everyone, but there is an advanced option called single link that we can activate. And so we hit yes on single link, and we'll see there's quite a few other options that appear here. But what the single link means is that we can send, instead of these instead of using the built-in mail merge functionality, we can just send this single link to respondents, and then they will be able to use, for example, name auto completion if we activate it, in order to start the response themselves from that single link. So I won't go through all these advanced options here, but there's quite a few options. So, for example, you can limit the number of respondents that can sign up. You can insist that sign up is required or not. You can either activate name auto completion, so when they start typing their name, they will be able to see their name appear and then select it. And you can also use identifying information in the sign up other than the email. So by default, it'll use the email information of the respondents. But suppose our respondents don't actually have emails, or we don't have access to their emails. We can use, for example, an employee ID number or some kind of password or passcode that we give to them. And in order to do that, we just upload an additional attribute in the respondent list, and that attribute we can then use as the identifying information. And then you'll want to use a dummy email address. So, for example, example.email+1@polinode.com, and so on. So, a unique dummy email address for each respondent. And in that situation, the respondents can then use that identifying information other than an email to sign up. And then we also have permitted domains, so you can restrict the email domains that respondents can sign up. So this is some more advanced functionality. Most of the time, you'll just want to have this on no, and just use the built-in email functionality. So I won't send an email out for this survey because I'm just demonstrating things. But at this point, you'll want to hit that email survey button. And now if I go to manage, we can have a look at some of the manage functionality here. So the first thing that you'll see is the dashboard. So this dashboard summarizes the total number of respondents in your survey, as well as the total number of responses received, the response rate that implies, and also whether any of the email addresses have bounced. So if an email address bounces, you can always go back to edit, and you can edit that email address here, and the status will show as bounced if that email address has bounced. And then you can go back to manage, and you'll go to send emails, and you'll select by status of bounced, and then send an email address to those respondents whose email addresses you just updated as bounce. So that's how you deal with any bounced email addresses if you want to deal with them. And this is the dashboard. Billing, so this just tells us that this is currently a free survey because we didn't apply any credits for this survey. And if we wanted to, we would just hit here to purchase some credits. Now, these surveys will remain accessible for 12 months. And so once you do apply respondent credits, you'll see the date at which those respondent credits expire under billing here. And then permissions, this just tells us what level of access we have to this specific survey. So since we created the survey, we're the owner, and we can add users and we can edit, remove users. And here's some settings. So here we can change the name of the survey. We can also have a different from name. So the email address, when we're sending this email to respondents, what's the name that they're going to see as the from name? So for example, if I'm a consultant sending this survey out, I might want to use the name of an executive who's sponsoring the survey in my client organization. So I can hit edit and change the from name here, but by default, it's equal to your name that you used when creating an account. You can edit the welcome message that respondents will see here. So it just says welcome, and then it'll insert their name. Please click next to start the survey. And then in case a respondent forwards their unique URL to another respondent, it just says if you are not that respondent, then please ensure that you use your own unique link to complete this survey. We also have a completion message, so just saying thank you. And both this welcome message and completion message, you can edit and you can use Markdown. So that means you can also insert images here, including any logos that you want, or URLs to click on as well. And there are some advanced settings. So there's the option to automatically redirect responses to a URL once they've completed the survey. That's this redirect option. Edit and explore, so that's not particularly relevant. And then edit submitted response. So by default, as a security measure, respondents cannot edit their response once submitted. So that's to ensure that if they enter a response and then forward their email or share their unique URL with other people cannot then go in and view the response that they've submitted. But if you would like to enable editing of submitted responses, you can do so here. So that's the advanced settings. And then responses, you can edit and enter any of the respondents' responses from this view. So if we click on example name 2, we can now edit this response. So we can enter Sydney for the city that they live in. And who do you work with often? We can select example name 3 and example name 4. We go to the next page. How important is it for you to have more access to the people you nominated? Not at all. And critical for example name 3 and example name 4. And then finally, what is your favorite holiday destination? Let's select Australia. And now that response has been submitted. So the status has changed to submitted. We could view that response. We can also clear it, and we can see the date and time that it was submitted on. We can also clear all the responses here if we wanted to, and we can download the respondent list from this view of responses as well. And if we download the respondent list, that will include the status of each respondent as well as any additional attributes we have. I've already showed you that you can send emails in terms of after you've fixed any bounced email addresses, but you can also send reminder emails. So this send emails functionality is most often used to send reminder emails. So we can say, you'll want to select, for example, everyone that's not started the survey. And often you'll want to copy your initial email across here. And then you can edit this to be a reminder. So we can call this, for example, first reminder, like so. And then we can edit this, and then we can send this, this email out just by hitting email selected responses. So let's click all the not sent people, and then we could hit email selected respondents, or we could send a test email, or we could just clear that email. And then you can also manage user permissions here. So at the moment, this demo account is the only account that has access to this survey. But we can add users either individually, like so, and looking them up by email, or we can upload a file of other users that we want to give access to this survey. Now I'm just going to hit the generate button now. So once this survey has run, you've collected responses, what you'll want to do is you'll want to generate these interactive networks. So this account already has a subscription to private networks. Now, all networks are private, and you can only generate, all surveys are private, and you can only generate private networks from surveys, just as an added protection, or protection of people's generally confidential data. Once the network has been generated, you could change it to public if you wanted, but in pretty much all situations, you'll want to stick with private data for surveys. So I'm going to hit this generate button, and then we have two choices. We can either generate all the networks for this survey, or we can select a question and just generate the network for that specific question. So I'm going to generate the networks for every single relationship question, so all three. And I hit that button, and now we get, well, because we didn't include any abbreviations for these questions, we get the question number and the full text of that question as the name of the network here. And so if we hit explore for this network, we'll be able to see that we have just those 5 very simple nodes. So this is a very simple network, just as an example. And we have those 5 respondents. And if we click on that respondent, we can then click on this link here to view the response for that respondent, like so. This respondent doesn't have a response yet, but we get a fully interactive network for each relationship question that we have asked. And we will have a network with 2 different types of nodes for question 4. So because that's a supplementary list question. We can also export all our data for this survey here, and we've already had a look at the clone functionality, so we can clone a survey and rerun it. And when we're ready, or if we want to, we can delete the survey, and that will delete all the information associated with it. We won't delete any networks that have been generated. And if you want to regenerate networks from a survey, just hit this generate button again, and the networks that have already been generated will be regenerated or updated. So that concludes this video.